Ukraine will still receive the so-called reparations loan of 90 billion euros over the next 2 years, which indicates that funding for Ukraine from Europe has been maintained. But this decision was difficult for the European Union. The governments of European countries were unable to reach an agreement on transferring specifically the frozen Russian state assets to Ukraine after a 16-hour summit in Brussels. This was a serious blow for German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen. Merz even said he was willing to give Belgium the Russian funds frozen in Germany just to get Belgium to agree with the European Commission's decision. But instead, the European Union countries had to agree on an emergency backup plan B based on a joint European Union loan, which had been promoted for several weeks by Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever, and which was considered unlikely. Until just a few hours before the deal was concluded, it wasn't. And here's another blow to Europe's unity, because in addition to Hungary and Slovakia, the Czech Republic is also not participating in the loan for Ukraine. In this episode, I'll tell you how much money Ukraine will get from Europe, under what conditions, and what will happen next with the frozen Russian assets. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's dive into this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and write any detailed comment under this episode. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peșei News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as soon as it comes in. So, the European Union summit on December 18 brought Ukraine not a perfect but quite a suitable result. The 90 billion euro loan is less than the expected 160, but it will cover the lion's share of Ukraine's needs for the next 2 years. The assets of the Russian Federation will remain frozen in Belgium's Euroclear and could potentially still be used for Ukraine's benefit through other mechanisms. Well, let's go through everything step by step. At the European Union summit, they failed to make a decision on granting Ukraine a reparations loan specifically. However, an alternative option, the so-called Plan B, was still agreed upon. The discussion on the issue of Ukraine lasted the whole day and continued into the night. And only by the morning of December 19 did it become known that the 90 billion euro loan had been approved. Its term was limited to 2 years, 2026 and 2027. Hungary, Slovakia, and as unpleasant as it may sound, the Czech Republic refused to participate in the joint loan. Let me point out one important thing right away to avoid any manipulation. The loan funds are non-repayable and interest-free for Ukraine, since the repayment will be tied to reparations from Russia. The repayment of the 90 billion euro loan is only expected after Russia compensates Ukraine for all the losses from the war. But on the other hand, this loan will not be connected in any way to the frozen Russian assets. The source of the money is joint borrowing by the European Union, backed by the budgetary commitments of European Union member states. That is, the Europeans themselves take out a loan and give this money to us. As a result, 90 billion euros will come from the European Union and another 45 billion from other partners of Russia through the European Union loan. All that remains is to carry out the technical work of preparing the agreements and to set the terms for providing it. But the fate of the reparations loan funded by Russian assets is still unknown. European Union High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Kai Kallas, said the chances of successful negotiations at Thursday's European Union summit on a reparations loan to Ukraine are about 50-50. The decision on a 210 billion euro reparations loan for Ukraine, 90 billion of which was to be allocated in the next 2 years, is now in limbo, as Plan A did not go through, since Belgium categorically refused to allow the Russian assets held in Brussels to remain as collateral for the Ukrainian loan. Even the decision of the European Commission to freeze Russian funds indefinitely did not work in this case, and it was made through the qualified majority procedure. The majority, that is, without taking into account the opinion of Hungary, which was, of course, against it. Sanctions previously needed renewal every 6 months. Belgium feared that if an extension failed, Russia would demand its money back, already held as collateral, forcing Brussels to use its own budget to pay the Russians. A week ago, the European Commission ended the requirement to renew the freeze every 6 months, but that still wasn't enough. Belgium seeks stronger guarantees and shared debt among all European Union members, wanting responsibility distributed across the European Union. In addition, the Belgian authorities reproach other countries where Russian assets are also frozen, such as the United States, Japan, Canada, and other European Union members, saying that they are not in a hurry to make any similar decisions. This reproach worked on Germany, by the way, and now the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, has confirmed his agreement to use the Russian assets frozen in Germany for Ukraine. To be fair, it's a small amount, only about 4 billion euros. However, the Prime Minister of Belgium's position could not be changed. And that's when information emerged that Russia is putting pressure on Belgium to prevent it from agreeing to the use of frozen assets, and is even using intimidation tactics. Threats, in particular, were directed at the chief executive officer of the Euroclear depository, Valery Urban, as well as other high-ranking executives of the depository. The Guardian wrote about this. The funds from the reparations loan are needed to support the army, defense production, and socially oriented budgetary needs. So for 2026-2027, Ukraine will receive the necessary minimum of 90 billion euros from the European Union out of the total loan amount, and of course, it can't do without these funds. If the fighting continues, the loan money will be used to support the army and purchase weapons. If the war ends, the loan will be directed toward reconstruction. Yes, the news is really alarming, and I understand that with such a flow of information, many people are just getting overwhelmed. We are living in a state of chronic stress, and it's normal to get tired of it. By the way, if you feel like you're already at your limit, like your battery is drained and nothing brings you joy, I have a recommendation for you. It's a YouTube channel run by a skilled psychologist who explains complex psychological processes using daily news without complicated terms to help us understand ourselves. By the way, he recently released an excellent episode about why we feel tired even without work and how to deal with it. Bobby Rapsai's YouTube channel link is in this video's description. Be sure to check it out, make sure to subscribe and watch the latest episodes. They're really helpful and, help you get your head straight. Well, let's continue. But it's important to note that the factor of the United States of America also played a role here. Ahead of the European Union summit, several major Western publications reported that the United States does not support the idea of using Russian funds to finance Ukraine. According to Politico, officials from the Trump administration held behind-the-scenes talks with the capitals of some European Union countries, as a result of which Italy, Bulgaria, Malta, and the Czech Republic are no longer speaking out. They aren't offering full support for the loan, according to Politico. According to a leaked draft peace plan agreed upon by the White House and the Kremlin, Washington wants to use part of the frozen Russian assets to finance efforts to rebuild the country. Under the leadership of the United States, American officials have been persuading European Union member states that the frozen Russian assets are necessary to achieve a peace agreement between Kyiv and Moscow and should not be used to prolong the war. In this context, it cannot be ruled out that if a peace agreement is reached, sanctions against Russia, including the frozen assets, will have to be lifted either fully or partially. As a result, for now, the issue has been resolved in a way that is not the most optimal, but still quite acceptable for Ukraine. The main thing is that there are guarantees from the European Union for funding military and logistical needs for the next 2 years. Friends, if this episode was useful for you, I ask you to support this YouTube channel financially with any donation or paid subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye. More to come.